Another extra innings heartbreaker in the playoffs for the Mariners. Ben Ranieri of Sea Level and I will break it all down coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Saturday, October 4th, 2025. This is Tony Gonzalez for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wish we were under better circumstances, but still happy to be joined by Ben Ranieri of the Sea Level Podcast and Substack to break tonight's game down. If you want to check out Ben's work, the link to that will be in the description of this show. Mariners dropped game one of the ALDS to the Tigers 3-2 in 11 innings. Ben and I are going to talk about George Kirby's night. We'll also talk about Dan Wilson's managerial debut in the playoffs. How much of a problem was he? But we have to start with the offense, Ben, because that's where this loss ultimately begins and ends for the Mariners. Julio Rodriguez and Cal Raleigh combined for 6 hits tonight, which is great. If I told you that Julio Rodriguez and Cal Raleigh were going to combine for 6 hits, you probably would have thought the Mariners easily won this game. The problem is, the rest of the Mariners lineup would have combined 0 for 28 with 2 walks on a bullpen night for the Detroit Tigers. Now, the first inning looked pretty promising for the Mariners. They didn't come away with any runs, but they had some good at-bats. Randy smoked a ball to lead off the game. Cal Raleigh nearly missed a double. A couple other nice at-bats over the course of that frame. But, from that point forward, it was more ugly than good. Julio had the home run. The 6th inning, they're able to claw their way back and tie that game up on an RBI single from Julio. But then they have first and second, nobody out. AJ Hinch goes to Holton, and Josh Naylor promptly hits into a double play, and that basically ends that threat. I think it was the 8th inning where J.P. Crawford and Randy Arozarena scorched a couple of balls. Maybe it was the 7th inning, 8th inning, whatever. Where they scorched a couple of balls to the warning track. Just couldn't get out. So there was the marine layer effect. There was everything. It was just a very annoying offensive night for the Mariners. So, Ben, what do you make of it? And just any other thoughts on the game to get us rolling here?
Yeah, it's tough because it's a little bit of like bad results on some good process. Like I thought they hit some balls hard. Obviously, that just got kind of marine layer, got knocked down at the wall. You had that Polanco swing in the first inning. That obviously a really good swing that you thought might find a gap. Doesn't, it gets caught, and then you got the Josh Naylor fly out like 108 miles an hour. So some bad results on some good process there, but then overall just a lack of kind of competitiveness from the lineup top to bottom. Mostly, from Gino all the way down to the bottom of the order. It was just, the Tigers found ways to put runners in scoring position. Did they cash in on those very often? No. But the Mariners didn't really put a lot of pressure on the Tigers all throughout the game. It was like, if they don't hit a homer, it's not going to result in any run scoring for them. So, it's just it's a frustrating night, top to bottom in the order. And if those are the only 2 guys putting together anything of substance offensively, quality wise, then it's going to be really tough. So you need something else from somebody else.
So brutal to watch. And again, because like you got maybe the game from Julio Rodriguez that we were all waiting for, right? He breaks the ice with a home run. He comes through with the big RBI to tie things up. Yeah, he had the strikeout, his next at bat, but Julio had a really nice game tonight. Julio had a very mature game. Again, like I think it was the game that we've all been kind of waiting for from him, especially in such a big spot. Again, he had 3 hits from Cal. Like the fact that you just could not get anything from this lineup that has been so deep. And I have sold so many times on this show as having no free outs in it. It's heartbreaking, man. It was heartbreaking to watch just every single inning. And again, like it wasn't just bad at bats, bad approaches. There certainly was that, right? There certainly were cookies that were missed and all that, but it was also just, Josh Naylor just smokes a ball. And with the camera, like, it made it look like that ball went, a billion feet, right? That ball's caught, by the fence. Again, the inning where JP and Randy smoked a couple of balls, like, I just felt like every single inning watching this offense just snatched my soul. And then there were a couple innings that just went by in an instant where it was just completely non-competitive from this offense. The bottom third of the lineup, and more specifically, Dom Canzone, Victor Robles, and then eventually Luke Raley. Awful. Just truly, truly awful.
Yeah, it's not like you have to expect those guys to get a hit every time, right? Like, that's not what you're expecting, but you're hoping that you get something of quality, whether it's, you drive up the pitch count a little bit, or you work a walk, or at least put some sort of pressure on them, and you just weren't able to do it from anybody in the bottom part of the lineup, which is it's going to be difficult, and that's what they've been so good at in this stretch is those guys finding some way to get on base or to do something to kind of set the table for the top of the order again, and they just weren't able to do that at all tonight. Yeah,
and again, you're facing a bullpen night from this Tigers bullpen that has regressed from where it was last year. Last year at times for this club, it carried things. It carried them to their incredible run that they went on. This year, not so much. Like, Will Vess has had a fantastic year. Kyle Finnegan has been really good since they brought him over. But, you were able to take advantage of Rafael Montero, who's really struggled with walks this year. He opens up that inning, going from an 0-2 count on Randy to walking him, and you were able to convert, at least on Randy getting on base. But other than that, like, Tommy Canley didn't do anything against him. Melton, who got smoked by the Guardians his last time out, you weren't able to do anything against him other than the Julio home run. Like, just so many missed opportunities. Like, this was the one you had to get.
Yeah.
You had to get this one, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but just a really disappointing night from this offense that is absolutely more than capable of taking advantage of an opportunity like this. And now they find themselves in quite the hole. And now it's going to be on this offense to dig deep against one of the best pitchers in the game tomorrow to maybe save their season.
Yeah, I think the other part of it that we haven't mentioned yet is, like, obviously you got to tip your cap to the Tigers a little bit. Like, those guys came in, they made pitches at times, but it's like it wasn't like there was a lack of hittable pitches either. Yeah. Like, there was a lot of infield pop-ups or weak flyouts. There obviously was the balls that were well struck that we talked about that didn't go their way, but there was a lot of very, very hittable pitches. I mean, on both sides, but hittable pitches that they just were not able to do anything with.
We're going to switch gears here. We're going to talk about George Kirby's night. We're going to talk about Dan Wilson. Those two things kind of go hand in hand. So we'll go over both of those things here in just a moment. But first, a reminder: this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks.
This episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right means cashing in. And with football back, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, easy, and a great way to follow along with football. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right.
And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Mariners lose 3-2 to the Detroit Tigers in Game 1 of the American League Division Series. And now the Mariners looking to try and salvage game 2 against Tarek Skubal. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But let's talk about George Kirby tonight. 5 really solid innings. I mean, obviously there's the home run to Kerry Carpenter, but he comes out amped. He's hitting 99. His average velo is well above his norms. And he was getting quite a bit of swing and miss as well. I thought he had, if it wasn't for the offense struggling as much as it was, I think we would be talking about George Kirby in a much more positive light than we ultimately are going to be tonight. But what did you think about his night?
Yeah, I thought he was pretty good. I think some of it is due to the fact that he was helped out by the umpire a little bit. Like that definitely helped. He was able to steal some strikes, a lot of strikes.
Yeah.
At the top of the zone.
I want to say this real quick. Like, yeah, the umpires sucked tonight, and it definitely favored the Mariners. And that's kind of another thing to mention about the offense. And the offense didn't really get screwed that much on calls. It definitely was a favorable strike zone for the Mariners overall. But Cal Raleigh had a phenomenal night behind the plate as well, I thought. He stole, God, I don't know, 8, 9 strikes, and all of them felt pretty important. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, no, I thought he was pretty good. Obviously, there was some times where he was really helped out in some big counts by the umpire and by Cal.
Yeah.
There was a lot of situations in that game where it did feel like he was really amped up, and there was more non-competitive misses than we typically see from him, like almost in the vein of Logan Gilbert a little bit, where he just like spikes a slider or a splitter, and you're like, holy cow, like that thing made it 40 feet.
Or like, or like like he threw a couple of fastballs that were like 1.5 feet above the zone.
Yeah, like he was definitely amped, and you could definitely feel that, but I think he channeled it pretty well, and I think he was helped a lot. Obviously, he was able to attack the upper part of the zone with that kind of newfound two-seamer that he got from Brian Wu, and so I thought he was pretty effective with that. It's just that it ultimately ended up coming to bite him a little bit, because that's pretty much the only area of the zone for the most part that he was able to attack consistently. He wasn't able to get anything down at the bottom of the zone. So as a hitter at that point, you can kind of just focus on, the middle of the zone and up, because he really wasn't, aside from, the slider or the curveball to Riley Green down at the bottom of the zone, like he really wasn't able to access the bottom part of the zone at all. And part of that is because, he doesn't really have a whole lot of confidence or usage in that changeup. Kind of gone away from the splitter completely, and he did miss with that breaking ball pretty often in the early innings and just the middle of the plate and then the upper part of the zone, and it worked out okay for him because he was dominating with the fastball in that quadrant as well. So no, I thought he gave you the outing that you would hope for, honestly. Like maybe not like he wasn't how he was in 2022 against the Astros. Like you can't expect that every time, obviously, in the postseason, but he gave you an outing that definitely gave you a chance to win that game. And he was really good at a lot of points, and ultimately kind of came down to a decision and got beat on a really, really tough pitch to hit from a guy that kind of has his number. Yeah.
But also on that, you go to the well so many times, and like you said, like he's constantly trying to live on that top rail and above with the fastball, and eventually, he got. And again, like you said, Carpenter just has his number. I mean, he's 5 for 11 now with 5 home runs. Like,
and at that point, like if you're Kerry Carpenter, like you are sitting there. Yeah, like you can't.
And you're just going to take your shot.
Yeah, and that's what he did. And you don't hit that pitch if you're not sitting on it. Like you just don't. You can't.
And the pitch before that, like it was a ball, but that was also a pitch that, it seemed like Cal did a pretty good frame job, and maybe that was, a pitch that could have been called given how the strike zone had gone. So that was a little brutal there, where he could have potentially got out of the inning. But was a good call at the end of the day. And just, yeah, I mean, I feel like that was more of Kerry Carpenter just beat George Kirby in that situation. I want to talk a little bit about just leaving him in to face Kerry Carpenter in a second. But yeah, Kirby's night wraps up 6 hits, 2 earned runs, 8 strikeouts, a walk. If you had told me that he was going to give up a home run, you know, maybe if you told me this like during the 2nd or 3rd inning, I would have guessed it was just on a hanging slider, like you mentioned. He hung that pitch quite a few times, but then he really found his slider command. Was it in the 3rd or 4th inning?
Yeah, he was the 4th.
And in some huge spots too, like the back foot slider to Riley Green. He also backdoored his slider to, I think, Zach McKinstry. So he also had some pretty nasty sliders the later on into the game that he went. And once maybe he finally settled in, maybe his nerves finally, you know, calmed down a little bit there. But yeah, he was definitely very amped tonight. But yeah, so Kerry Carpenter comes up. Gabe Spire's warming up in the bullpen. Dan seemingly was at least considering taking George out there in that situation, and George, you know, winds up only getting 1 more out for the rest of his night. What do you think about that decision? Because to me, and I'm very much not a Dan Wilson guy, people know this, that to me was a little bit more of a tougher decision than I think some people are making it out to be. But how did you feel about it?
Yeah, I think in that moment, I probably would have just gone to him. But it's so easy to say that after the fact. I mean,
gone to Spire.
Yeah, gone to Spire.
Yeah.
I tweeted before the game that my 2 kind of keys to this series were Randy Rosarena and then Gabe Spire and his usage in kind of that chess match to use him anytime from the 5th inning on.
Yep.
And that was the opportunity right there where, you know, maybe you go to him right there because that is, you know, the biggest moment that might potentially happen. Now, then you wouldn't have had him later in the game, and who knows how that ends up going. But, you know, at that point, maybe you get that out in that big spot. So it's tough. I think part of it is hard for me to digest as well when it's like, you know, Kerry Carpenter did beat him with just a really good swing on a really good pitch too. Like it's not like it was George was gassed and he left a slider like right in the middle of the plate and he just hit it. Right. It was a really tough pitch and a really tough pitch, especially to do that on. Like it's very impressive. So part of it is just kind of a tip your cap situation. But in that moment, I was like, yeah, they're going to go. I think they should go get him and go to Spire just because it's the postseason, or even like, you know, maybe even Caleb Ferguson in that moment. If you were going to use him, you know, to start the next inning anyways, like, I think I probably would have opted just because of the large splits difference for Carpenter. I probably would have just in that moment with how much he's hurt you in the past, just gone to one of those lefties. But, you know, I think it's a little bit of hindsight.
What did you think about Dan overall in his playoff debut? So that decision and just how he handled the rest of the game.
Yeah, I think it's
there's a lot of talk about him right now on social media.
Yeah, and I've seen that all night. I think it is, some of that is just like scar tissue from you know, him making decisions in the past that have come back to bite them. Ultimately, to me, like, it's really hard for me to put this game on Dan Wilson. Like it just really is. You gave up 2 runs, you know, 3 runs. That's incredibly, incredibly difficult to put on the manager when, you know, you should score more runs off of this. You're not facing Tarek Skubal today, right? Like,
well, yeah, and well, in the 11th inning, right? Like, what is he supposed to do? You've already burned Munoz for 2 innings. You burned Brash. You burned Spire. I guess the one nitpick that I have, but I mean, it was just the game situation was that Bizzardo only got one out in this game.
Yeah.
But also like the next inning, it was very clearly Gabe Spire time. Like you were just in that pocket where it had to be Spire against what was it, Meadows and then Carpenter, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, Bizzardo only getting, I guess it's more like it's less about Dan and it's more just like looking at the overall picture. Bizzardo only facing one batter, that hurts. But yeah, like I think for the most part he pushed the right buttons tonight. I wasn't a fan of him trying to steal outs with Caleb Ferguson there in the sixth inning. But yeah, I mean, just other than that, though, other than the keeping Kirby in the game decision, it's hard for me to have much of an issue with what Dan did tonight. And again, I'm very much not a Dan guy, so yeah, that's coming from me.
Yeah, and I'm open to criticism on him as well. Like I'm not up here just blindly defending Dan Wilson. I think that the only thing that you could have an issue with maybe is not going to Spire. Ultimately, like I do understand the people that are like you use Bizzardo for one out. That kind of feels like a waste. I do get that a little bit, but also at the same time, like you got through 10 innings giving up 2 runs. Like you were playing to win that game in 9 innings, right?
It wasn't like it's 2-2 going into the ninth, and here comes Carlos Vargas before Andres Munoz, right? That's what I was scared of. I mean, I literally tweeted in the bottom of the 8th, I don't want to find out what Dan's plan is if they don't score here, right? And thankfully it was Munoz. That's the right call there in that situation. So it wasn't like outside of trying to steal outs there in the 6th with Caleb Ferguson, like he didn't get too cute with it with the bullpen. He just ran out of guys, and maybe that leads to more of a an overarching discussion about maybe going out and getting another reliever at the deadline. But whatever, that's all in the past now at this point. So yeah, I mean, in hindsight, and even in the moment, I think the right decision there in the 5th inning was to go to Spire against Carpenter. That's really my only real criticism of Dan tonight. But at the end of the day, your offense scored 2 runs against a bullpen night for the Detroit Tigers, who don't have the bullpen that they did last year.
Yeah, I get the frustration with because it's a game that you should have won. And I get the frustration online and from the fan base and stuff like that with Dan specifically. But ultimately, like, did you pitch well enough to win that game? Yes, you did. And I didn't think that Dan got bodied by AJ Hinch or anything like that. Like I thought AJ Hinch obviously managed a good game and he did a really good job with his pitching matchups against the Mariners offense. But I don't think that anything that Dan did pitching wise was like horribly catastrophic to the result. I just don't see that.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so we're going to wrap things up here, talking a little bit about what's to come tomorrow in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel.
The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. So given what we saw tonight and what's awaiting the Mariners tomorrow, then I'm having a very hard time having a positive outlook on the rest of the series. You going to help me climb out of this hole of depression or what?
I'm trying to think like what would be the most Mariner thing to have happen. Like, is the most Mariner thing to beat Scooble tomorrow, and then
kind of.
I think ultimately, like if you came out of this home stand, this home portion of the series with a split, I think you would be like, yeah, like that'll play.
Yeah.
Like we'll let that rock. Or is it, is the most Mariner thing to go down 0-2 and then magically, be really good on the road again offensively or something, and then tie it up and then come back home? Like I don't exactly know. But obviously it's really tough to, and I think part of this is that I'm sure that those players feel the pressure a little bit of who's looming in game 2. It's like you put a lot of pressure on game 1. And so you never know. Maybe, game 2 with Scooble, they have oddly performed really well in these situations against the, Scoobles and Crochets and those elite types. Like they've been able to, and I think Luis Castillo has done an admirable job in these situations as well. Like, keeping pace with these aces, even though he's not one. He's been able to do this in the past. And so I don't think that it's just completely over, but I think, Daniel Kramer and Adam Juden, those guys were, I think like 12 teams it was something like that. I don't know what the exact stat was, but it's a very small number, very small percentage of teams, going down 1-0 in this 5-game format have been able to climb out of that hole. So at the end of the day, it's going to be a tall task.
Yeah. And like I said on the show, like this is what you wanted to avoid. You had to win game 1 because, I mean, the opportunity was right there. They had the bullpen game. You don't have to face Scooble until game 2. But now you're down 0-1. They have a ton of momentum on their side. They're feeling great about themselves in that other clubhouse because they got their guy going. They just stole a win. They just stole home field advantage from you. And now they got their guy going. Yeah. But tomorrow is really going to put the theme of this entire season to test, which is, I think I talked about this with Colby on Friday, Thursday, whatever. It feels like this club has been just way better against pitchers that they have a ton of film and data on, and they struggle in the situations where they don't have a ton of information on those guys, like, in a bullpen game, for example, right? And with a guy like Melton, right? So there's that. There's just, the Mariners of it all. I'm coping hard right now. I'm not going to lie with you. I'm coping very, very hard right now because this is bad. Like, let's not beat around the bush. Like, this is very, very bad. This is the worst possible thing that could have happened, is losing game 1 in this series, given what's awaiting you tomorrow. Luis Castillo has been the stabilizer all year long. That's kind of the other theme here, right? Luis Castillo has been the stabilizer at times where, when Logan Gilbert went down, when George Kirby started the year on the IL, he has to be the guy again. What have we said all year long? Even when he was in his rough stretch, where would this team be had they traded him this winter?
Yeah.
So now you got your guy who, he's definitely not the guy he was in 2022 in Toronto. But over his last few starts, he's really found a way to adapt and make his current version of himself work. And he's pitched very well in this ballpark. You are putting him in the most favorable possible position. And he's been here before in a much lower leverage situation. But you had Castillo versus Scooble back in April, or was it end of March, whatever. It was in that second series.
Yeah. April.
Start the year. You won that game. Can you do it again in a much, much higher leverage situation?
Yeah, I mean, if you're coping on this, it's less so about, the Mariners beating Scooble, and more so about the Mariners beating the Tigers, if that kind of makes sense. Like it's Castillo being able to keep pace with Skubal, being able to suppress this offense. And it's going to be the same thing in every game in the series is, can Castillo, who does have significant splits against righties and lefties, like, can he keep, he's pretty good against righties, but can he keep those lefties off the board? Is going to be the big thing. And also, like, you ran your bullpen pretty hard tonight. So obviously, so did the Tigers. But they also have Tarek Skubal going tomorrow. So that's obviously their card here. But it's more so about Luis Castillo in a big game, which he's performed in the past. So it's not totally just dead on arrival here. I do think that they can keep this game close. It's more so just like, what's the cat and mouse here? Like, if you try to be aggressive on Skubal early in the game, he could go 8 against you. And that is not what you need.
No.
But if you try to, he's not a guy that's going to walk you. He's not a guy that's going to, hang around the edges of the zone and things like that. So it is going to be very interesting to see how this offense responds and if their approach and things look a little different. And maybe it is, because maybe this comes down to a situation where they're not trying to do. It did seem like there were times tonight, and I struggle to just put this on them because it's, I don't exactly know, but it did seem like there was times tonight where they were just trying to do too much. And maybe against Skubal, it's a situation where they aren't trying to do that because you really can't. And so, I don't know. We will see, but it's definitely going to be Luis Castillo is the key, because if Skubal shuts you down, which he probably will do a pretty good job of, because he's maybe the best pitcher in the game, you're going to need Luis Castillo to keep pace.
Yeah. Now, if you win tomorrow, you have the chance to win the series without seeing Skubal again. Now, maybe you see him out of the bullpen if the Tigers get super desperate in like game 4. But you could avoid seeing him starting another game. And if you win tomorrow, I can cope my way into thinking, like, hey, it's like if you won game 1, but you lost the Skubal game. Yeah. So there you go. So we'll see how it goes. Mariners just flat out have their backs against the wall now. And we'll see how they respond. I mean, this is really going to test the mettle of this club. And we'll see if they have what it takes. And we'll see if this offense can put together a better offensive performance than the one that they put together tonight, despite them facing, again, maybe the best arm in the entire league.
Yep.
So we'll see how it goes. All right. Well, that's going to do it for a show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Ben Ranieri, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez and Ben at Ben Ranieri10. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you after the game tomorrow. Peace.